Da 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 da. Da 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 da. What do you say we use the Force to practice our REST API skills? That's right, we're going to use the Star Wars API. So fire up the lab in this nugget and we'll get started. Once you're at the screen I'm looking at now, go ahead and click on the Postman icon right here. Postman is our interface we'll use to interface with our REST APIs to practice them. And once you launch Postman, you should see a screen similar to this. You should actually already have the URL for the API right in the box. This guy right here, SWAPE, Star Wars API. And you may already have the results for the first get action like I have right here. You see, we are at the root of the API. If I try to get from this root, I'm losing my voice here, it sends me back the stuff we can possibly look at. Now, not every API is going to give you back stuff off the root. Some will just go, there's nothing here. What are you looking for? Look at the documentation, which is actually what I want you to do. So notice the website is swape.co. Go to that website for me. You can do that in the lab if you want, or just open your web browser, which is probably easier. Where I want you to go is to the documentation. You can get there at the top right, documentation. Put a pin in this, keep it here, because you're going to use this to test your API skills, your REST API skills. And you're going to use the API to answer some of my questions I have here as kind of a review. Now, I'm going to point you in the right direction real quick before I let you go for the first question. Notice in the documentation, it tells us, okay, cool, down here we have our base URL, the root. We got that already. This is an open API, so there's no authentication. Typically, you would have some authentication using a token. However, don't need it here, which is good, because everyone should be able to enjoy Star Wars freely. And then I want you to pick out this, searching. Look at that. Wink, wink. So, on to our first question. I want you to tell me what year Luke Skywalker was born. And you're probably like, what? Well, I'll tell you this. Luke Skywalker is a person. So he would be maybe in the people category. Pause the video, use the Force, Luke, and tell me what it is. Unpause. Welcome back. So let's see how we can find out the year Luke Skywalker was born. Now, if you already knew that year, you've been watching way too much Star Wars. But for most of us, we'd have to search in the API. Let's do that. Now recall a key attribute of an API, if it's going to be a REST API, one of the pirate code rules, is that it must be uniform in nature and or in interface. And part of that is having clear documentation, clear ways to find things. And this is by far the coolest I've seen so far. So we know that we want to find the age of Luke Skywalker, and we're going to be looking in people. And there's the URL for people right there. So I know naturally I'll be looking at people. And if I tried to send and get stuff from that, it'll send me either a list of people or maybe just randomly generate a person. Like here. No, it gave me a lot of people. But how do I find the people I'm looking for? These aren't the people you're looking for. No. How do I find the person I'm looking for? Well, look at the documentation. For searching, and this is the exact example we're using, right? We can do a question mark and then search equals R2. Pop quiz. What is that element in our URL? We know that this is the server up to this point. This is the resource. What is this part right here? Answer, it's a parameter. And one of the parameters we can use is we can query or search API results. So we're going to search for Luke Skywalker. So I'll do a / question mark search equals, and I'm going to search for, you could put Skywalker, you could put anything, but I'm just going to put Luke. Where you at, Luke? Let's see what we can get. Woohoo! Luke Skywalker we have found. That was last time you're getting the Yoda voice. That was the worst. Anyways, here's our information. So the first question was, what year was Luke Skywalker born? And if your answer was 19 BBY, then you got it. So the answer, 19 BBY. I don't know if he's old, young, I don't know what's going on. Next question, how many films has Luke been in, and what type of value is in this key value pair? Pause me and go. Unpause. Time for the answer. Let's get back to our API. Get back to Postman. So looking at that same information, we have a whole plethora of information about Luke Skywalker here. We can see that down here in the results. I've got films. You may recall that the API spits out for us JSON encoded data, our data serialization language, and It's just a series of key value pairs contained within our JSON objects, which are basically dictionaries. And within this particular dictionary, we have our key value pairs: name, Luke; height, 172. And then we have films. Films being the key. And then we have the value, which is a list of films. So the answer would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 films. You've been in 5 films. But what type of value is this? That's the key. That's the value. What is this? Well, we can see we've got the open square bracket, which we know that if we have data between open square brackets and this is a string because it's between 2 quotes. So we have a list of strings that are comma separated. This looks like a list. I will accept that answer. I will also accept the answer of array because that's the JSON terminology. Final question. How many passengers were there on the Death Star? And if we were to update that value, because if you've seen the movies, the passenger list decreased rapidly as time went on. How would you update this value using an HTTP method? Which method would you use? So pause me and go. Unpause. Here I am. Let's answer this question. Let's get back to our postman. Now we'll use a similar strategy to how we found Luke Skywalker. But what is the Death Star? Well, we know it's probably not a person. Could be a planet. So you might have searched planets and you might have found nothing. But then you might have kept going down. Vehicle, maybe. But it's actually a starship. So you may have had to look a few places, but you would have eventually found it because there's only so many categories. The Death Star is indeed a starship. So I'll change my category to starships. And then I will look for, using question mark and search, equals death. I'll just use death and send. Woohoo, we got one back, the Death Star. And for passengers, if you answered 843,342 passengers, that is one big ship. But then how would we update this value using the REST API? Assuming we could. Well, first you'd have to check the API documentation, and if you put we can't, well then bonus points for you because you can't really update this API. But theoretically, if we could, what would you do? Well, looking at our HTTP methods, we know that we organize our methods in with CRUD, C-R-U-D, create, read, update, delete. Those are the 4 categories, and they're matched up to our HTTP methods. Our methods are post, get, patch, put, and delete. Post is for creating, get is for reading, delete is for delete, and then we have patch and put, which are both methods we can use to update our values or whatever you want to update in JSON and the REST API. So I would have accepted either of those. And which one would you use? Well, it'd be up to the API documentation. You look in there, it'll tell you, oh, we accept put. Oh, we accept patch. And that is it for our lab and our questions. I can't move my screen around. There we go. The fun thing about a REST API and JSON is that you can practice a lot with whatever you're into. So they have an API for a dictionary. Merriam-Webster, you can query that for a dictionary. They have a Bible API, so you can query the Bible. You saw how we had Harry Potter and Star Wars. They have everything. So I encourage you to just practice, have fun. Just go out there and call whatever API you can. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.